Today, we are so fortunate to have Dr. Laura P. Minero presenting. Dr. Laura P. Minero is a postdoctoral fellow at the DMH UCLA Prevention Center of Excellence and the Empower program in the Jane and Terry Semmel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior at UCLA. Dr. Minero presently provides bilingual and bicultural, trauma-informed, affirming, and evidence-based treatment and develops curriculum for supporting LGBTQ+ individuals across the lifespan. She also specializes in working with undocumented immigrants, people of color, and Spanish-speaking populations, both as a clinician and community consultant. Dr. Minero's scholarly work has included contributing to scientific consensus studies used to inform national policy. And we are so fortunate to have her present today, and I feel very fortunate to be able to introduce her, so I will turn it over so she can share all of her wisdom with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olin. It means so much that you're here, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. And also thank you to the STAR Clinic and the Department of Behavior and Population Health for having me. I was an intern here last year, so it was really great to get to attend the STAR seminars, and it's really amazing to get to facilitate one of these as a postdoctoral fellow. So before I get started, also just want to, bring attention to the important acknowledgement of the Tongva people, past and present, who have long stewarded the land that we currently reside and gather on. I also just want to acknowledge that we're coming out of a really tough year. We've lost a lot of our siblings to COVID, and so if you've experienced a loss, my condolences to you. We also experienced the murder of several of our Black siblings at the hands of police, and I also want to acknowledge that and honor that. And I think that's really important, especially with the presentation that I'm giving today, to acknowledge. And we also didn't know when we were planning this back in December, it did not cross our minds. I think we were all in the middle of a really tough year. We didn't realize today was Inauguration Day. So it's a big deal that you're here. We know that those activities are currently going on right now. So thank you for doing your best to be present today. And just thank you so much for being here. So in all of the work that I do, it's really important for me to start with my positionality. And I do want to give a trigger warning before I get started. So I'm stating my trigger warning. Some of the things that I say may be triggering. These aren't people, these are animals. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. I, as an undocumented immigrant of Mexican origin, heard these words spewed by Trump over the last 5 years since he announced he would run for presidency. Though shocking to some, this has been normal, the very rhetoric my parents, who are pictured here with me before we immigrated to the US, my family, my community, and I have resisted against every day of our lives in the US. The praxis of intersectionality calls for us to actively state and utilize our positionality throughout the conduct of our work. Though we are hosting this presentation on the inauguration of a new president, we must not forget what got us to the last 4 years. And though invisible to many, white supremacist, homophobic, transphobic, classist, and ableist notions will persist unless we actively challenge them through our personal and professional reflection and work. I come to you with the positionality that many and most of the institutions in which we currently operate cannot be reformed, but rather need to be completely abolished and rebuilt to center the needs and health of our rich and diverse communities. I know the deficit of these systems intimately as an undocumented, queer, gender-expansive Mexican head of low socioeconomic status and first-generation immigrant to the United States. I acknowledge my privilege in having access to education and a world that accommodates my physical abilities as important access that has enabled me to do the work I will present to you today. Despite the privilege I have been granted, I continue to fight for the survival of my parents and extended family because their humanity is not and will not be recognized until we enact change. So with that, I think we know why it's so important, right? And highlighting again, the fact that you're here, the fact that you are present. And I really, really was excited to give this presentation. This is work that is really close and personal to me. So I really hope you enjoy this. One of the things that we're going to be doing today is helping you increase your awareness of various of your axes of power and oppression. We're also going to learn how intersectional awareness can strengthen our anti-racist work and cultural responsiveness. We're going to explore issues of intersectionality in a brave and experiential space, and also learn from one another's narratives. So I want to start with this because often, in psychology and social service fields, we talk about cultural competency, but I want to talk about why we really need to shift from that. So we often think of cultural competency in these preventative terms, something that makes people nervous, and the word competency might also imply that something is unattainable. And it really is. How can we possibly be competent, right? And all things, all people, right? From diverse backgrounds, this is just impossible. So one of the shifts that I want us to make in our work is to begin using or thinking about what it means to be culturally responsive. What does it mean to be responsive to the needs of people both from your background and other backgrounds? Because no two people, even from the same backgrounds, experiences are the same, right? So this is about creating cultural awareness and acknowledging that cultural responsiveness requires us to engage in a lifelong process and also to take responsibility, right, for what is required to engage in this work. So this means that you take personal investment and care and learning about how to best serve others and also yourself and how you conduct yourself. So I want to talk a little bit about the theory of intersectionality too, and how this relates to cultural responsiveness. One of the things that I think has been lacking a lot in our field, right, and we continue to see today, is that we don't think about what people experience. Rather, we categorize people and think solely about their identities, right? And that's oftentimes because we don't experience some of those things. So it might be difficult for us to be attuned to that or acknowledge another person's experience. So the theory of intersectionality, which was first founded by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black legal scholar who is incredible. She's actually at UCLA and continuing to do amazing work. Talked about how important it is to recognize the system, right, and the various systems that we operate in and how they impact us. And these are the various forms that in which they might impact us. One of the things I've noticed in my field, there was actually a scientific study conducted on this, is how often the theory of intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw is used incorrectly. So people often only focus on the aspects of a person's identity and how they overlap, how they're parallel, and this is incorrect. So I wanted to be really, really thorough here and talk about the focus really needs to shift to people's experiences of racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, heteronormativity, classism, ageism, ableism, and the list can go on, right? So here's a brief example of how this comes to play, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next slide. So for example, a gay man may experience homophobia, but a Black man may experience racism. A Black gay man will likely experience homophobia and racism, often at the same time. It is also possible for him to experience racism in the LGBTQ community and homophobia in the Black community. So this is just a brief example, right, of how this might play out for an individual. And that was a very simplified example. This is where things get a little bit more complex. So I don't know how familiar people are with this illustration. Sometimes people call it the wheel of domination, but it is developed based again on Kimberly Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality. And if you can take some time to look at this and truly look at this and reflect where you might land, right? One of the key things about this image is that we all have different axes of power. So places where we might hold privilege and may even hold power over people because of that privilege, and other axes of oppression. So here are some of those identities that you see at the bottom. So many times what I want to bring your attention to is these little lines in the center where you see above the line of domination that says like Eurocentrism, heterosexism, ableism. These are the things that we may engage in consciously or unconsciously every single day, inherently because of how the systems are set up in US society. So many times we actually operate within these systems in these ways because of our privilege, and we have no idea that we may in fact be exerting power or domination over other people who may not fit that, right? Who then become the receivers of that ageism, the receivers of that language bias, the receivers of that colorism or that transphobia, right? Just inherently because of our position in society and our own identities. So research suggests that none of us are immune from inheriting racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and other biases of our society. And this is because our country was stolen via the genocide of millions of our indigenous siblings, where land and culture were also stolen. Our Black siblings were enslaved, abused, and previously and currently killed. Borders were created, and white supremacist notions of citizenship were established as science. Science was used to promote eugenics. So this is why we really, really need to pay attention to the ways we engage in these everyday actions, because the systems that we currently operate in were never meant for us. So it is undeniable that many systems in the US in which we operate today and are served by also were meant to serve the colonizer and never meant to consider and center the well-being of folks of the global majority. So I think one thing that many people don't know living in the US is that people of color are actually the global majority. So over 88% of the world's population is people of color, but only here in the United States are we considered a minority. So we see a different domination, right? So this wheel of domination may look different somewhere else, right, in another place. So it's also important to consider cultural context and geographic region as we do this work. This is also another shift that I think is important in some of our work. And I think more people have become aware of Dr. Ibram Kendi's work, and I continue to still learn myself. But we really need to shift from normalizing abuse. And this is a really beautiful quote where Dr. Kendi talks about our need to move away from the term microaggressions, which is really, really, I mean, the term was founded within psychology, right? And he talks about why this is actually problematic. And this is why I'm not going to be talking about this today. I actually like shifted, and my own work and doing this presentation personally has grown a lot because of Dr. Kendi's work. So he says, I do not use microaggressions anymore. I detest the post-racial platform that supported its sudden popularity. I detest its component part, micro and aggression. A persistent daily low hum of racist abuse is not minor. I use the term abuse because aggression is not as exacting a term. Abuse accurately describes the action and its effects on people. Distress, anger, worry, depression, anxiety, pain, fatigue, and suicide. One of the key things about Dr. Kendi's work also is naming, right, that there's no such thing as like somebody just not being racist, right? You could be racist one moment and not racist the next. And I think that this is something that we don't talk about often enough. I remember throughout my work and engaging in communities that for a long time, there was this understanding that in order to be racist, you had to hold power, and that you couldn't be racist if you were a person of color. And that is incorrect. So I really, really encourage you to do more of this work. Some of the things I'm inviting you to do today will speak to that. But it's really about taking the time in your day, taking the time in your own life to do some of that deep digging. So I really encourage you to look at some of Kendi's books and his work. I was encouraged, by my own friends in doing this work as well, and it's really helped me grow. So I just want to bring attention to that. As I just mentioned, Dr. Kendi's work in recognition, right, that we can be racist in one moment and anti-racist the next. I want to ask each of you to reflect on this question. So what are assumptions that people, be it coworkers or those you serve, or just the community that you exist in general, have made about you, and vice versa, right? Because we also make assumptions. And how did this impact you or others? And I would love for people on this workshop to share and to chime in on either of these experiences. So I'm not going to go into this so much in depth so that we have time to jump into the activity, but these are just a few things that you can begin to do to engage in an anti-racist work and cultural responsiveness skills. And I do view them related. And I highlighted the first two because these are the two that we're going to be focusing on today. And the rest are just small suggestions. This is not the end all be all list, obviously, right, of the things that you can do to engage in this work. These are just a few suggestions. So today we're actually going to help you learn a little bit more about yourself and others, and learn how to check your accesses of power and privilege. In the work, I've seen, again, this shift. I've shifted this for myself. People have often called these checking your blind spots. And I want to share this because this is something that I held myself accountable to. I changed the language because that is very ableist language. And so we want to be mindful to that. So instead, I shifted it to checking our accesses of power and privilege, because we want to make sure that we know, right, the ways in which we might be dominating others or treating others in a certain way because of our inherent privilege and our own biases, our own racism, our own sexism, our own transphobia, our own anti-Blackness, and how we play into those things. You're doing one of these today. You're doing step 3, or attending, right, anti-racist and social justice focused conferences and trainings. You can also allocate resources. One of the biggest drawbacks, like I know I ask people to ask for these resources at work, and oftentimes people are like, we don't have the resources, right? So allocate them. So I changed the step, also allocate the resources so that people that you are working with are all getting this training. We know that this works in a systemic way. So even if one person is doing the work and is all for it, if the whole organization isn't on board, you're gonna continue to see these problems, right? And as my colleagues shared what their experiences have been, right? If one person's being impacted, that's gonna impact everybody, right? And we can't move forward that way. So we really need to think system-wide how we can engage this and really intertwine this as part of our work every day. And number 5 is one of my favorites. Seek accountability. I don't think we talk about this enough. I'm probably, one of my dear friends, Dr. Rupi Lega, says this all the time, and I need to say it too. I'm probably going to mess up. I'm probably going to say something that's, either ableist or racist. And I need accountability for that, right? That's just a part of our lives. It's okay to mess up, but we need to be responsible, right? If somebody gives us feedback that we messed up, we need to take responsibility for it. So one of the things I've done is really surround myself with people that I can check in with and be like, hey, like I had this interaction, like, what do you think about it? Did I mess up? And do I need to go talk to that person, right? What can I do to take responsibility? So make sure that you start to think about who holds you accountable in your life. So how do you start to increase your understanding of yourself and also others? So this is often done right through introspection and deep digging, really thinking through interactions and experiences that you've had in your life. And then recognition of our feelings, emotions, and how these contribute to our present sense of self. Paying close attention to how our identities are multi-layered and how they may intersect or parallel other aspects of our identities. We want to learn how to acknowledge the privilege that is granted with some of our identities and how we may be dominating and oppressing others via that privilege. We also want to reflect on how different events and experiences in our life influence our thinking, knowledge, and ways of engaging with others and the world. So thank you for everyone who shared and participated via the chat and unmuted yourselves to share with us today. I encourage you to connect with each other. Please also, here's my contact information. If there's anything that you'd like to process further that we didn't get the chance to process today, please do follow up with me. I'm always open to dialogue. Here's some of my social media handles if you want to connect in a more informal way as well. Just so much gratitude for you all and the way you brought yourself fully to this space. Thank you. And I hope we do connect in the future. I'm going to turn it over to our organizers to close us out.
Thanks so much, Dr. Minero. That was a wonderful, reflective, informative presentation. And thank you all for attending today's STAR seminar. For more resources around community trauma and resilience, explore the Wellbeing for LA Learning Center. Thank you again for attending, and thank you again, Dr. Minero, for a great presentation. We hope to see you again soon.